The grand ballroom of the Eco Hotel in Lagos fell silent as Chinedu Okafor stepped through the gilded doors. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. The crystal chandeliers seemed to dim as 500 pairs of eyes locked onto the man who shouldn't have been there. Adaeze Nnamdi Williams stood frozen at the center of the room, her champagne glass halfway to her lips, her perfectly painted mouth falling open in genuine shock. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. This wasn't the plan at all. Chinedu moved through the crowd with a confidence that made the marble floor seem to shift beneath everyone's feet. He wore a tailored navy suit that fit him like it had been sewn onto his body by Italian hands, custom-made shoes that caught the light with every step, and a smile that suggested he knew exactly what he'd walked into. The same smile he'd worn 5 months ago when he drove Adaeze's Mercedes S-Class through Lagos traffic while she mocked him from the back seat. Impossible! Adaeze whispered to her best friend Ngozi, who stood beside her in a designer gown that cost more than most people's yearly salary. That's my driver. That's Chinedu. How is he here? How does he look like that? What would you do if someone you'd humiliated showed up where they didn't belong, looking better than you'd ever seen them? Hit like if you've ever underestimated someone, and comment below where you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to see how this unfolds. The invitation had been Adaeze's idea of entertainment. 2 weeks ago, after Chinedu had driven her to yet another charity gala for Lagos's elite, she'd handed him a cream-colored envelope with gold lettering. Her friends Ngozi, Kayamika, and Obioma had been in the car, recording on their phones, already giggling before the joke landed. "Chinedu, you work so hard," Adaeze had said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I think you deserve to see how the other half lives. Consider this your invitation to the Nigerian Elite Business Summit. It's this Saturday at Eco Hotel. Black tie, of course." The women had erupted into laughter as Chinedu accepted the invitation with a quiet, "Thank you, ma'am." They'd posted a video on their private WhatsApp group with crying laughing emojis, already imagining him showing up in his worn driver's uniform, confused and out of place, providing them with hours of entertainment. But now, watching him move through the crowd like he owned the building, Adaeze felt something cold settle in her stomach. The summit was the most exclusive business event in West Africa. CEOs, politicians, tech moguls, and old money families gathered annually to network, make deals, and remind each other their importance. Security had been intense. The invitation list was strictly controlled. There was no way Chinedu could have gotten past the entrance with that joke invitation unless something was very, very wrong with Adaeze's understanding of the situation. "Adaeze!" Ngozi hissed, gripping her friend's arm. "Everyone's staring at us. They're whispering. What's happening?" Before Adaeze could respond, the summit's organizer, Chief Bamidele Adeyemi, one of Nigeria's most powerful businessmen, began moving toward Chinedu with his arms extended in welcome. The crowd parted like water. "Mr. Okafor," Chief Adeyemi's voice boomed across the ballroom. "We are honored to have you. I've been hoping to meet you in person for months." The words hit Adaeze like a physical blow. Mr. Okafor? The chief knew him? How? Chinedu shook the older man's hand with easy familiarity. "Chief Adeyemi, thank you for accommodating my late registration. I've been keeping a low profile, but when I received this invitation, I thought it was time to step into the light." He turned then, his eyes finding Adaeze across the room. That same quiet smile played at his lips, but now it carried something else. Something that made her blood run cold. "After all," Chinedu continued, his voice carrying clearly through the silent ballroom, "Mrs. Nnamdi Williams was kind enough to personally invite me. How could I refuse such gracious hospitality from my employer?" The word employer landed like a grenade. Whispers exploded around the room. Adaeze felt her face burning as hundreds of Nigeria's most influential people turned to stare at her, their expressions shifting from confusion to scandalized interest. Chief Adeyemi's eyebrows rose. "Your employer? But Mr. Okafor, I thought you were the founder of—" "A conversation for later, perhaps," Chinedu interrupted smoothly. "First, I believe Mrs. Nnamdi Williams and I have some things to discuss." He began walking toward her, and with each step, Adaeze felt her carefully constructed world beginning to crack. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping stories like this. What do you think Chinedu's real identity is? Comment below your theories, because what happens next will blow your mind. Adee's hands trembled as Chinedu approached. Around them, the cream of Nigerian society pretended to return to their conversations while keeping their attention locked on the unfolding drama. Phones were discreetly angled to capture every moment. By morning, this would be all over Lagos social media. Mrs. Namdi Williams, Chinedu said softly when he reached her, his voice low enough that only their small circle could hear. You look surprised to see me. I don't understand. Adeeze managed, her usual commanding tone reduced to almost a whisper. How are you here? Who are you? Chinedu's smile didn't waver. I'm exactly who I've always been. You just never bothered to ask. You saw a driver, so that's all you allowed yourself to see. Ngozi stepped forward, her protective instincts overriding her shock. Look, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you need to leave before we call security. Security? Chinedu's eyebrows rose slightly. The same security that confirmed my identity and escorted me in personally? I don't think they'll be helping you tonight. Kayamika, ever the instigator, pulled out her phone. We have the video of you accepting that invitation in Adee's car. We know you're just her driver. Whatever scam you're running ends now. A scam? Chinedu's expression shifted, and for the first time, Adeeze saw something harder beneath his calm exterior. Is that what you call it when someone takes a job to understand a business from the ground up? When they want to see how people treat those they consider beneath them? What are you talking about? Adeeze demanded, finding her voice even as her mind raced to the past 6 months. Chinedu had appeared at her company's driver agency in June, with perfect references and an almost overqualified resume for a driver position. She'd been between drivers and hired him immediately, pleased to have someone so competent and quiet. Let me paint you a picture, Chinedu said, gesturing around the opulent ballroom. 6 months ago, I sold my tech startup to an American company. The deal was finalized quietly, signed under NDAs, because the buyer wanted to maintain the appearance that it was still African-owned during transition. The sale price was $87 million. The number hung in the air like smoke. Adeeze felt her knees weaken. That's ridiculous, Obioma interjected, but her voice lacked conviction. If that were true, why would you work as a driver? Because money reveals character, Chinedu replied simply. I wanted to see Lagos from a different angle before I made my next moves. I wanted to understand how the wealthy treat those who serve them, and I wanted to test a theory about whether kindness exists at the top of the pyramid or if it's just performance. He looked directly at Adeeze. You failed that test spectacularly. Adeeze's mind flashed through 6 months of interactions. The way she'd never said good morning. The time she'd made him wait in the scorching heat while she finished shopping. The constant stream of errands that extended far beyond a driver's duties. The mockery, the dismissiveness, the video, the invitation, she breathed. You knew it was a joke. Of course I knew, Chinedu said. Did you really think I couldn't tell when you and your friends were laughing at me? I have the video too. You posted it in a group chat with 43 members. 3 of them work for me in various capacities. They sent it to me within minutes. Ngozi's face went pale. That was a private chat. Nothing is private when you employ half of Lagos, Chinedu replied. But I didn't come here for revenge. I came because you issued an invitation, and I thought it was time for some honesty. Chief Adeyemi appeared at Chinedu's shoulder, concern creasing his weathered face. Is everything all right here? Mr. Okafor, if these women are bothering you. These women employ me, Chief, Chinedu said clearly, and Adeeze wanted to sink through the floor. Well, one of them does. Mrs. Namdi Williams pays me 25,000 naira per week to drive her around Lagos. The chief's eyes widened. Around them, the pretense of private conversations collapsed entirely. Everyone was openly staring now. 25,000 naira? Chief Adeyemi repeated slowly. You're telling me that you, the founder of Okafor Tech Solutions, the company that revolutionized mobile banking across West Africa, work as this woman's driver for 100,000 naira a month? 108,000, Chinedu corrected. She gives me a small Christmas bonus. Someone in the crowd laughed. then someone else. Within seconds, the laughter spread through the ballroom like wildfire. Not cruel laughter, but the kind that comes from sheer absurdity. Adaeze felt her face burning hotter than she'd thought possible. "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why would you do this?" Chinedu's expression softened slightly, but his eyes remained hard. "Because 6 months ago my mother got sick. Cancer. She needed around-the-clock care, and I wanted to be in Lagos, available, flexible. Driving gave me that. It gave me time to think, to plan, to watch. And it gave me a front-row seat to see exactly who you are when you think no one important is watching." He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and turned it toward her. It was a video she'd posted, the one where she handed him the invitation, while her friends laughed. "I've been documenting everything," Chinedu said quietly. "Every dismissive comment. Every time you made me load your shopping bags in the rain while you stayed dry. Every occasion you forgot to pay me on time. Every instance of casual cruelty. For what?" Adaeze whispered. "To humiliate me?" "No," Chinedu said. "To show people who you really are. Because tomorrow I'm announcing my new venture. A foundation dedicated to protecting domestic workers, drivers, and service staff from exploitation. And you, Mrs. Namby Williams, are going to be my first case study." The ballroom erupted into shocked murmurs. Cameras were no longer discreet. This was news. This was scandal. This was everything Lagos society fed on. Adaeze's world tilted sideways. The ballroom felt too hot, too bright, too full of eyes that had shifted from admiring to judging in a matter of minutes. She could already see the headlines forming in real time on social media as guests live-tweeted the confrontation. "You can't do this," she said, hating how weak her voice sounded. "You signed an employment contract. There are confidentiality clauses." Chinedu's laugh was soft and utterly without humor. "Mrs. Namby Williams, I wrote contracts for a living before I sold my company. Do you really think I didn't read every word of the one-page agreement you had me sign? There's no confidentiality clause. You use a template from 2003 that you downloaded from the internet." Kayamika grabbed Adaeze's arm. "We need to leave. Now, before this gets worse." "Worse?" Chinedu echoed. "Oh, we're just getting started." He raised his voice slightly, addressing not just their group, but the entire crowd that had now abandoned all pretense of discretion. "Ladies and gentlemen, forgive me for interrupting your evening, but I think it's important we have honest conversations about how we treat the people who serve us." Chief Adeyemi looked uncomfortable, but didn't intervene. This was too good a story, too rich with the kind of drama that Lagos society thrived on. Besides, Chinedu Okafor was worth listening to. His company's sale had made international news, even if his name had been kept quiet during the transition period. 6 months ago, Chinedu continued, "I took a job as a driver, not because I needed money, but because I wanted to understand something. I wanted to see if the values we claim to hold, Ubuntu, community, respect, actually exist when no one thinks they're being watched by their equals." He paused, letting his words sink in. "What I found was disappointing. I found a woman who treats human beings like furniture, who speaks to her driver like he's deaf or stupid or both, who thinks 25,000 naira a week is generous compensation for someone available 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's the market rate." Adaeze protested, finally finding some of her old fire. "Every driver in Lagos makes approximately the same. And doesn't that tell you something?" Chinedu shot back. "That we've normalized exploitation so thoroughly that we call a market rate? Mrs. Namby Williams, you spend more on a single handbag than you pay me in 3 months. That bag you're clutching right now, Hermes Birkin. I know, because I picked it up from the store for you last month. 12 million naira. My annual salary will be 5.4 million naira if I actually work for you for a full year." The crowd murmured. Some nodded. Others shifted uncomfortably, perhaps calculating their own workers' salaries against their luxury purchases. Ngozi tried a different approach. "This is a personal employment matter. It's inappropriate to discuss it publicly." "You made it public when you posted that video," Chinedu replied calmly. "You invited 43 people into the joke. I'm simply expanding the audience to match your original intention. You wanted people to laugh at me. I'm just making sure they understand the full context of what they're laughing at. A woman in the crowd called out, "What video?" Chinedu's smile was sharp. "Excellent question. Mrs. Namdi Williams. Would you like to show everyone, or should I?" Adaeze's stomach dropped. "Don't. Why not? You weren't shy about sharing it before." Chinedu turned to the crowd. 2 weeks ago, my employer thought it would be hilarious to invite her poor, simple driver to this prestigious event. She and her friends recorded the moment, laughing about how I'd probably show up in my work clothes, confused and out of place. They posted it online for entertainment. He projected the video onto his phone screen, then gestured to a nearby tech crew member who was managing the summit's presentation equipment. Within seconds, the video was playing on the massive screens throughout the ballroom. There was Adaeze's voice, dripping with false sweetness. "I think you deserve to see how the other half lives." There was the laughter of her friends. There was Chinedu, accepting the invitation with quiet dignity, saying only, "Thank you, ma'am." The ballroom's atmosphere shifted palpably. The earlier amusement at the situation curdled into something else. Disapproval. Disgust. The kind of social judgment that could destroy a reputation in Lagos's tight-knit elite circles. "Jesus Christ, Adaeze," someone muttered loud enough to be heard. Chief Adeyemi cleared his throat. "Mr. Okafor, while I appreciate your point, perhaps we could discuss this more privately." "With respect, Chief, no," Chinedu interrupted. "Privacy is how these behaviors continue. Privacy is how people like Mrs. Namdi Williams treat their staff like dirt Monday through Saturday, then show up to charity galas on Sunday and accept awards for humanitarian work." Adaeze felt tears burning behind her eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of rage and humiliation, and the dawning realization that her social standing was crumbling in real time. "You think you're so noble," she spat, her voice shaking. "But you're just a liar. You lied about who you were. You manipulated me into hiring you." "I never lied," Chinedu said quietly. "I gave you accurate references from people I actually worked with during my startup days. They happen to be former employees who've moved on to other companies. I have a valid driver's license and clean driving record. I never claimed to be anything other than a driver. You never asked about my background. You never asked about my education, my experience, my dreams, or my story. You saw what you wanted to see." He stepped closer, and his voice dropped to a level only their immediate group could hear. "And here's the part that should terrify you, Mrs. Namdi Williams. I'm not the only one watching. I'm not the only educated, capable person working in service positions, observing how the wealthy behave when they think no one important can see them. We're everywhere. We're your drivers, your housekeepers, your security guards, your nannies, and we talk." Adaeze opened her mouth to respond, but found she had no words. Chinedu straightened and addressed the crowd one final time. "Tomorrow morning, I'll be announcing the Workers' Dignity Foundation. We'll be providing legal support, fair wage advocacy, and protection for domestic and service workers across Nigeria. And we'll be sharing stories. Real stories from real people about how they're treated by families whose names you'd recognize." He turned back to Adaeze, and his expression was almost pitying. "You could have just been kind. That's all it would have taken. Just basic human kindness. But you chose cruelty, and you chose to make it public. So now we'll discuss it publicly." As Chinedu walked away, disappearing into the crowd that parted respectfully for him, Adaeze felt her phone buzzing insistently. Text messages, WhatsApp notifications, Instagram tags. The story was already spreading like wildfire across social media. Ngozi looked at her phone and went pale. Adaeze were trending, not in a good way. The ride home was silent. Adaeze sat in the back of the Uber she'd been forced to call, watching Lagos rush past through tinted windows. Ngozi had abandoned her at the summit, claiming a sudden headache. Kayamaka and Obioma had simply disappeared when the social media notifications started flooding in. Fairweather friends, all of them. She'd always known it. But tonight the truth cut deeper than usual. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, every platform was alive with the story. Someone had coined a hashtag, #DriverGate. Another was calling it hashtag Karma in Lagos. The video of Chinedu's revelation had been viewed over 200,000 times in less than 2 hours. But worse than the mockery, worse than the memes already circulating, were the stories that had begun emerging. Real stories from real domestic workers, all using the hashtag my employer story. Housekeepers describing being paid starvation wages while watching their employers throw parties that cost millions. Security guards talking about working 12-hour shifts with no breaks. Nannies raising other people's children while barely seeing their own. And in every third or fourth post, someone mentioned her name, tagged her, called her out specifically as an example of everything wrong with how Lagos's elite treated their workers. Adaeze PR consultant, Tund, called as the Uber pulled up to her house in Ikoyi. She answered on the first ring. "Tell me you can fix this," she said without preamble. "Mrs. Namdi Williams, I'm going to be honest with you." Tund's voice was carefully neutral. "This is bad. This is career-ending bad for most people." The video, the public confrontation, the wage disparity, the mockery, it's a perfect storm. And now that workers are coming forward with their own stories, you're becoming the face of a movement, the wrong side of a movement. So what do I do? Adaeze's voice cracked. She hated herself for the weakness, but she was terrified. Her entire life was built on her reputation, her social connections, her image. "You have two options," Tund said. "Option 1, you apologize. Publicly, sincerely, and immediately. You acknowledge that you treated Mr. Okafor and potentially other workers poorly. You commit to doing better. You make a substantial donation to his foundation. You become an advocate for workers' rights, even if it's uncomfortable. And option 2, you fight. You hire lawyers. You claim he manipulated you, that his undercover operation was unethical. You attack his character, question his motives. You try to shift the narrative to make him the villain." Adaeze considered this. The old Adaeze, the woman she'd been 6 hours ago, would have chosen option 2 without hesitation. Attack, destroy, win at all costs. But that woman's world had already been destroyed. "What would you advise?" she asked quietly. Tund was silent for a long moment. "Mrs. Namdi Williams, I've worked in PR for 15 years. I've handled scandals for politicians, celebrities, business moguls. And I can tell you that the only people who survive situations like this are the ones who take genuine accountability. The ones who fight usually make it worse. They become cautionary tales." Adaeze ended the call and sat in her driveway, staring at her house. 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a swimming pool, a garden maintained by 3 groundskeepers. Her husband Emeka's car wasn't in the driveway. He was probably at his club, hearing about this from his friends before she could explain it to him. Her phone rang again. This time it was her mother. "Adaeze, what have you done?" Her mother's voice was sharp with disappointment. "Your father and I are already getting calls. Do you know how this makes our family look? Mama, we didn't raise you to treat people like this. Your father started with nothing. Nothing. He worked as a laborer before he built his business. How could you forget where we came from?" The words hit harder than any social media post. Adaeze had forgotten. Or maybe she'd chosen to forget. Somewhere along the way, she convinced herself that her family's wealth was old money, that she was born into this life rather than being one generation removed from poverty. "I'm sorry, Mama," she whispered. "Sorry isn't enough. You need to fix this. Really fix this, not just manage the image. That young man was right. We're supposed to lift each other up, not tear each other down." After her mother hung up, Adaeze sat in the darkness of her car for another 20 minutes. Through her living room window, she could see her housemaid, Blessing, cleaning up after dinner. Blessing, who had 3 children she saw only on Sundays. Blessing, who Adaeze paid 70,000 naira per month for 6 days a week of work that started at 5 in the morning and often didn't end until 10 at night. Blessing, who she'd never once asked about her dreams or her struggles or her life beyond these walls. Adaeze pulled out her phone and started typing an Instagram post. She deleted it, started again, deleted again. How do you apologize for being a terrible human being? How do you make amends for years of casual cruelty? A text message from an unknown number appeared on her screen. Mrs. Namdi Williams, this is Chinedu. I wanted you to know that this was never personal. I don't hate you, but I needed you to understand that actions have consequences. What you do next will determine whether you're defined by your worst moment or by how you respond to it. The choice is yours. Adaeze stared at the message for a long time. Then she got out of the car and walked into her house. Blessing looked up from the dishes. Startled, "Blessing," Adaeze said softly, "can we talk?" The older woman's eyes widened with concern. "Ma, is something wrong? Did I do something wrong?" "No," Adaeze said, and felt tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "I did, and I need to start making it right." She pulled out a chair at the kitchen table, something she'd never done before. "Please sit. I want to hear about your life, about your children, about everything I should have asked years ago." Blessing sat slowly, confusion and suspicion warring on her face. But she sat, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Adaeze listened instead of talking, really listened. Outside, Lagos continued its endless rhythm, indifferent to one woman's crisis of conscience. But inside that kitchen, something small and fragile was beginning to shift. The question was whether it was too little, too late. If you were Adaeze, would you apologize or fight back? What do you think Chinedu's real endgame is? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter, where everything changes. Hit that like button if you're enjoying the story, and share it with someone who loves real-life drama. 3 days after the summit, Adaeze sat in a small office in Yaba, Lagos's tech hub, waiting for a meeting she requested but wasn't sure would happen. The office belonged to Okafor Tech Solutions, though the sign outside was modest, almost invisible between a restaurant and a phone repair shop. Nothing about it screamed $87 million company. The door opened and Chinedu entered, dressed in a simple blue shirt and black trousers. He looked different here, in his element, than he had in either his driver's uniform or the expensive suit from the summit. He looked comfortable. "Real, Mrs. Namdi Williams," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "I was surprised to get your call." "I'm sure you were." Adaeze's hands twisted in her lap. She'd rehearsed this conversation 100 times in the past 72 hours, but now that she was here, the words felt inadequate. "I wanted to speak with you privately before I make any public statements." Chinedu sat down, his expression neutral. "I'm listening. I've spent the last 3 days thinking about what you said, about who I become." Adaeze forced herself to meet his eyes. "And you were right, about all of it. I treated you terribly. I've treated a lot of people terribly. I convinced myself that paying a market wage was enough, that basic politeness was optional because I was the employer and they were just workers." She took a shaky breath. "I talked to Blessing, my housemaid. Really talked to her for the first time in 4 years. Do you know her daughter has sickle cell anemia? She's been missing treatments because Blessing couldn't afford the medication and the transport to the hospital. For 4 years, I've walked past this woman every single day and never once asked if she was okay or she needed help." Chinedu's expression softened slightly, but he remained silent. "I talked to my security guard, Akin. He's been saving for 7 years to finish his degree in computer science, but he can barely afford 1 course per semester on what I pay him. 7 years, Chinedu. He could have finished 3 degrees by now if I'd paid him fairly." "Why are you telling me this?" Chinedu asked quietly. "Because I want you to know that I heard you, really heard you, not just the public humiliation part. Though believe me, I heard that too. The entire country heard that." She managed a weak smile. "But I heard the part underneath, that people matter, that how we treat those who work for us reflects who we really are." She pulled an envelope from her bag and placed it on the desk. "This is a letter offering Blessing a new contract. Tripled salary, health insurance for her and her children, paid vacation, and a flexible schedule, so she can be home when her kids finish school. I've made similar offers to Akin and my other staff." Chinedu picked up the envelope but didn't open it. "And you want what from me? Forgiveness? A public statement saying you've changed?" "No," Adaeze said firmly. I want to help with your foundation. I know you don't need my money, but I have connections. I have influence, or at least I did before this week. I want to use whatever I have left to actually do something good. Why should I trust that this is real and not just damage control? It was a question Adaeze had been asking herself. You shouldn't, she admitted. I wouldn't trust me either. But I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to let me prove it through actions over time. Let me volunteer. Let me use my platform, whatever's left of it, to amplify your message. And if I mess up, if I fall back into old patterns, call me out again. Chinedu studied her for a long moment. You know this won't fix your reputation overnight. Social media has a long memory. You're still going to be the villain in a lot of people's stories. I know. Adaeze's voice was steady. And honestly, maybe I should be. Maybe that's the consequence I have to live with. But I can't change the past. I can only try to do better going forward. What does your husband think about all this? Adaeze's face tightened. Emeka thinks I should sue you. He thinks your undercover operation was entrapment or fraud, or something his lawyers can fight. He's furious that I'm here, that I'm even considering apologizing. He says I'm making our family look weak. And yet, you're here anyway. And yet, I'm here anyway, she echoed. Because when I look at my life right now, at the comments online, at the way my friends have abandoned me, at the disappointment in my mother's voice, I realize that Emeka and I built our entire existence on appearances, on what people thought of us rather than who we actually were. And that foundation is crumbling. She stood up, preparing to leave. I know you don't owe me anything. I know I don't deserve your help or your forgiveness. But I wanted you to know that you changed something in me that night, whether you meant to or not. Mrs. Namdi Williams. Chinedu called as she reached the door. She turned back. Adaeze, he corrected, using her first name for the first time. The foundation is hosting a town hall next week. Workers from across Lagos sharing their stories, talking about their experiences. I'd like you to be there. As what? An example of what not to do. As someone who's learning, Chinedu said, and maybe, if you're willing, someone who can speak to other employers about why this matters. Not as a reformed villain seeking redemption, but as a human being who made mistakes and is trying to do better. Adaeze felt something loosen in her chest. Not forgiveness, not absolution, but something like possibility. I'll be there. As she left the office and stepped back into the chaos of Yaba's streets, her phone buzzed. Another message from Emeka. Where are you? We need to talk about the lawyers. She typed back, I'm not hiring lawyers. I'm making this right. His response was immediate. Then you're making it right alone. I'm not going down with you. Adaeze stared at the message for a long moment, then put her phone away. She'd been married to Emeka for 6 years, and she was only now realizing that she barely knew him beyond his professional accomplishments and social connections. They'd built a marriage on the same shallow foundation as everything else in their lives. Maybe it was time to rebuild, even if she had to do it alone. The next morning, Adaeze posted a video on Instagram. No filters, no makeup, no script. Just her, sitting in her living room, looking directly at the camera. My name is Adaeze Namdi Williams, and I need to take accountability for my actions. Within an hour, it had 1 million views. The comments were mixed, some supportive, many skeptical, some outright hostile. But she'd started something she couldn't take back. And for the first time in years, she felt like she was moving in the right direction. The town hall was held in a community center in Surulere, far from the glittering hotels and exclusive venues where Adaeze usually spent her time. She arrived early, dressed simply in a traditional Ankara blouse and jeans, her hair pulled back without the expensive styling she usually favored. No designer bags, no jewelry beyond her wedding ring, which she'd almost left at home. The room was already filling with people. Domestic workers, drivers, security guards, nannies, the invisible workforce that kept Lagos running. They eyed her with suspicion and recognition. She was the woman from the video, the villain of their collective story. Chinedu was at the front of the room, setting up a microphone with a young woman Adaeze didn't recognize. When he saw her, he nodded and made his way over. You came, he said. I said I would. Saying and doing are different things. I've learned that recently. There was no malice in his voice, just observation. Are you ready for this? Some of these stories are going to be difficult to hear. I need to hear them, Adaeze said firmly. The town hall began with Chinedu's introduction. He spoke about the Foundation's mission, about creating systemic change in how domestic workers were treated and compensated. Then he invited people to share their stories. The first was a woman named Folktales, a housekeeper in her 40s. I worked for a family in Lekki for 8 years, she began, her voice shaking slightly. I raised their 3 children. I was there for first steps, first words, everything. When their youngest started calling me Mama, my madam got angry. She said I was confusing the child. She fired me the next day with no notice, no severance. I haven't seen those children since. They were like my own. Adaeze felt tears pricking her eyes. She thought of Blessing's children, the ones Blessing barely saw because she was too busy raising Adaeze's daughter. A man named Teo spoke next. I'm a driver. I've been driving for the same family for 12 years. Last year, my son got into university. First person in my family to ever go. I asked my employer if they could help with the fees. Maybe just the first semester. They just bought their daughter a new car for her birthday. You know, just because. They told me my salary was my salary, and I should have planned better. The stories continued, each one a small tragedy of casual cruelty and systemic exploitation. A security guard forced to work 24-hour shifts with no relief. A nanny who wasn't allowed to eat meals with the family, had to wait until they finished and eat whatever was left. A cook who was blamed and fired when the madam gained weight. By the time the sharing session ended, Adaeze's face was wet with tears. Chinedu approached the microphone again. We have a special guest today, he said, and Adaeze's stomach clenched. Someone who's agreed to share her perspective from the other side. Mrs. Adaeze Namdi Williams. The room went silent. Hostile eyes turned toward her. Someone whispered, "That's the woman from the video." Adaeze stood on shaking legs and made her way to the microphone. She looked out at the sea of faces, people who had every reason to hate her, and took a deep breath. I don't deserve to be here, she began. I don't deserve your time or your attention. But Mr. Okafor invited me, and I came because I need to say something. She gripped the sides of the podium to steady herself. Everything you've heard about me is true. I treated my driver, who turned out to be Mr. Okafor, with contempt. I mocked him. I underpaid him. I never saw him as a full person with dreams and struggles and a life beyond serving me. And he's not the only one. Her voice cracked. I have staff who've worked for me for years, and until last week, I couldn't have told you their children's names or what they wanted from life. I paid them as little as I could get away with while spending more on a single handbag than their annual salary. I convinced myself that was normal. That was just how things worked. Why should we believe you've changed? Someone called out from the crowd. You shouldn't. Adaeze said honestly, change isn't something you announce. It's something you prove through consistent action over time. I'm not here asking for forgiveness or sympathy. I'm here because I need you to know that what Mr. Okafor did worked. He held up a mirror, and I saw exactly who I'd become. And I hated what I saw. She paused, gathering her courage. I've tripled my staff salaries. I've added health insurance and paid leave. But that's just the beginning. The bare minimum of what I should have been doing all along. The real work is changing how I see people, how I value them. That's going to take time, and I'm going to mess up, but I'm committed to trying. A woman in the front row stood up. It was Blessing, Adaeze's housemaid. Adaeze hadn't known she would be here. Ma'am, Blessing said, and the room went even quieter. You asked me 3 days ago about my daughter, about her sickle cell. You cried when I told you how we've been struggling. Adaeze nodded, unable to speak. The next day, you gave me money for 6 months of her medication. You called the hospital and arranged a payment plan for her treatments. You told me to take Fridays off to be with her. Blessing's own eyes filled with tears. In 4 years, you never asked. But when you did, when you finally saw me, you acted. That matters. It should never have taken this long. Adaeze managed. No, it shouldn't have, Blessing agreed. But you're doing it now. That's something. The room erupted in conversation. Some people nodded in agreement. Others looked skeptical. Chinedu let it run for a moment before calling for quiet. Change is uncomfortable, he said, for everyone involved. Mrs. Namby Williams is right that she can't undo the past, but she can influence the future. And that's what this foundation is about. Not just calling out exploitation, but creating paths forward. After the town hall ended, people approached the D's. Some wanted to share their own stories. Some wanted to challenge her, to make sure this wasn't just performance. She listened to all of them, took their contact information, made promises she intended to keep. Emeka arrived home at noon, dressed in his usual expensive suit, his face tight with controlled anger. Adaeze was waiting in the living room, the same space where they'd hosted countless parties and impressed countless guests with their perfect life. "We need to end this circus," Emeka said without preamble, not even sitting down. "My partners at the firm are asking questions. My mother called me crying because her friends are gossiping. This has gone far enough." "Sit down, Emeka," Adaeze said quietly. "I don't want to sit down. I want you to stop this ridiculous apology tour and hire the lawyers I recommended. We sue Okafor for fraud, for invasion of privacy, for whatever we can make stick. We flip the narrative." "No." The single word hung in the air. Emeka stared at her as if she'd spoken a foreign language. "What did you say?" "I said no." Adaeze stood up, meeting his eyes. "I'm not suing Chinedu. I'm not fighting this. I was wrong, Emeka. I was cruel and thoughtless, and I hurt people. And instead of being concerned about that, you're worried about what your partners think." Emeka's face flushed red. "Of course I'm worried about what they think. I'm up for senior partner this year. This scandal could cost me everything I've worked for." "Everything you worked for," Adaeze repeated slowly. "What about everything our staff has worked for? What about Blessing, who's been raising our daughter while barely seeing her own children? What about Akin, who guards our home every night for poverty wages?" "They're employees, Adaeze. We pay them. That's the transaction. What more do you want?" And there it was. The fundamental difference between them laid bare. Adaeze had been exactly like him a week ago, but something had shifted. She couldn't go back to seeing people as transactions. "I want to be someone our daughter can be proud of," she said. "Right now, if she grows up like us, she'll become exactly what I was. Entitled, cruel, blind to other people's humanity. Don't bring Zainab into this. She's already in this. What do you think we're teaching her when she sees how we treat Blessing? When she hears us talk about our staff like they're furniture? She's 7 years old, Emeka, and she already corrects Blessing's English like she's superior. Where do you think she learned that?" Emeka ran a hand over his face. "So, what do you want? You want to give away all our money to domestic workers? You want us to become some kind of charity case? I want us to be decent human beings. That shouldn't be a radical concept. Decent doesn't pay for this house. Decent doesn't send Zainab to the international school. Decent doesn't maintain the lifestyle you've enjoyed for years without complaint." The accusation stung because it was true. Adaeze had enjoyed every luxury their wealth provided. She'd never questioned where it came from or who paid the real price for their comfort. "You're right," she admitted. "I've been a hypocrite. I've lived off this system while pretending not to see how it worked. But I can't do that anymore." "Then you're a fool." Emeka grabbed his briefcase. "I'm not going down with you. Adaeze, I've worked too hard to let your guilt complex destroy everything." "Where are you going?" "To my lawyer. If you won't protect our family's interests, I will." He paused at the door. "And I'm filing for divorce. I can't be married to someone who's become a social liability." The words should have hurt more than they did. Instead, Adaeze felt a strange sense of relief. Their marriage had been another performance, another part of the image they presented to the world. Without the image, there was nothing holding them together. "Okay," she said simply. Emeka looked taken aback, as if he'd expected her to beg or fight. "Okay? That's all you have to say. What else is there? You're right that we want different things. You want to maintain an image. I want to become a better person. Those goals aren't compatible. You'll regret this, Emeka warned. When you're alone and your social circle has abandoned you, and you realize that principles don't keep you warm at night, you'll regret this. After he left, Adaeze sat in the silence of her house. Blessing appeared from the kitchen, concern on her face. "Ma," I heard shouting. "Are you all right?" Adaeze looked at the woman who'd been more of a mother to her daughter than she had been, and felt tears streaming down her face. "I don't know. Ask me again in a few months." Blessing surprised her by sitting down on the couch beside her, close but not quite touching. "My husband left me when our daughter got sick," she said quietly. "Said he couldn't handle the stress and the medical bills. Told me I should have prayed harder, like her illness was my fault. I didn't know that. You never asked." Blessing's tone wasn't accusatory, just factual. "But I survived it. I raised my children alone. I found strength I didn't know I had. You will too, ma'am." "Adaeze," she corrected. "Please, just call me Adaeze." Blessing smiled slightly. "That will take some getting used to." The next few days were a blur of legal consultations and difficult conversations. Emeka's lawyer was aggressive, demanding primary custody of Zainab and a division of assets that would leave Adaeze with significantly less than half. He was using her public scandal as evidence of instability and poor judgment. But Adaeze had her own lawyer now, a woman named Amara, who specialized in family law and had a reputation for fighting dirty when necessary. "He's trying to paint you as mentally unstable," Amara explained during their meeting. "The public apologies, the charity work, the sudden personality change. His lawyer is arguing it's a breakdown. That's ridiculous." "Is it?" Amara's gaze was sharp. From the outside, looking at someone who completely altered their behavior and worldview in a matter of days, it could look like instability. "So what do? We tell your story. Not the edited version for social media, but the real one. Why you changed, what you learned. We show that this wasn't a breakdown, but a breakthrough. And we document everything you're doing for your staff, your community work with Chinedu's foundation. We make the case that you're becoming a better parent, not a worse one." The custody hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In the meantime, Adaeze threw herself into the foundation work. She attended every event, listened to every story, and slowly began to understand the scope of the problem she'd been part of. She also started spending more time with Zainab. Real time, not just the performative mother-daughter photos she used to stage for Instagram. They cooked together with Blessing, went to the market, talked about what it meant to treat people with respect. "Daddy says you're being silly," Zainab said one evening as they folded laundry together. Something Adaeze had never done before. "He says you're giving away our money." "I'm trying to share it more fairly," Adaeze explained. "Do you know how much Blessing makes a month?" Zainab shook her head. "Less than your school uniform costs. Does that seem fair to you? She takes care of our whole house, cooks our meals, helps take care of you. Shouldn't she be able to take care of her own family, too?" Zainab thought about this. "I guess not. But Daddy says that's just how the world works." "The world works the way we make it work," Adaeze said, "and we can choose to make it better or keep it the same. Which do you think we should do?" "Better," Zainab said after a moment. "I like Blessing. I don't want her to be sad." It was a small moment, but it felt like progress. Like maybe she could raise a daughter who saw people instead of servants. 2 weeks before the custody hearing, Chinedu called. "There's something you should know," he said. "Emeka's been digging into my background, trying to find dirt he can use to discredit the foundation and, by extension, your involvement with it." "Did he find anything?" "Nothing real, but he's shopping a narrative to the press that I orchestrated this whole thing as a shakedown, that I targeted you specifically because of your social standing, and that my foundation is just a front for extortion." Adaeze felt rage building in her chest. "That's insane. You sold your company for millions. You don't need money. Rational people know that. But scandal sells, and your husband knows how to manipulate a story. What do? We fight back," Chinedu said, "but not the way he expects. I want to hold a press conference. You, me, some of the workers who've benefited from the foundation. We tell the truth before he can poison it with lies. When? Tomorrow, if you're ready." Adaeze thought about Emeka, about his threats and his lawyers, and his determination to destroy her for choosing principles over image. She thought about Zainab, watching and learning what it meant to stand up for what was right. "I'm ready," she said. The press conference would either save her reputation or destroy what little remained of it. But for the first time in her life, Adaeze was more concerned with doing the right thing than with how she looked doing it. The press conference was held at the Foundation's headquarters, a modest building that Chinedu had purchased and renovated in the past week. The room was packed with journalists, bloggers, and curious onlookers. Cameras lined the back wall. This was Lagos at its finest. Everyone loved a good scandal, and this story had everything. Adaeze sat at the table beside Chinedu, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from shaking. Blessing sat on her other side, along with 3 other domestic workers whose lives had been changed by the Foundation's interventions. Behind them stood a banner reading Workers' Dignity Foundation. Every person matters. Chinedu spoke first, his voice calm and clear. "Thank you all for coming. Over the past 2 weeks, there's been a lot of speculation about this foundation, about Mrs. Namdi Williams, and about my motivations. Today, we're here to set the record straight." He outlined the Foundation's mission, the success stories already emerging, the partnerships being formed with legal aid organizations and labor unions. Then he addressed the rumors directly. Some have suggested that I orchestrated an elaborate scheme to extort or embarrass Mrs. Namdi Williams. That's categorically false. I took a job as a driver because I wanted to understand the lived experience of domestic workers in Lagos. What I discovered was a systemic problem much bigger than any one employer. Mrs. Namdi Williams became an example not because I targeted her, but because she chose to make her mockery public. He turned to Adaeze, but she also chose to change. That's the story that matters. Adaeze took a deep breath and leaned toward her microphone. "I'm not here to defend my past actions. I can't. I was cruel, dismissive, and blind to the humanity of the people who work for me. What Mr. Okafor did was hold up a mirror, and I didn't like what I saw." A journalist called out, "Is it true your husband is divorcing you over this?" "Yes," Adaeze said simply. "Emeka and I have different values. He believes maintaining our social standing is more important than treating people with dignity. I disagree. That disagreement ended our marriage. Do you regret your decision to apologize publicly?" Adaeze thought about that. "I regret that it took public humiliation to wake me up. I regret the years I spent treating people as less than human. But do I regret trying to do better? No, never." Blessing leaned forward then, her voice shaking slightly but determined. "I want to say something. I worked for Mrs. Namdi Williams for 4 years. For most of that time, she never asked about my life, my children, my struggles. When my daughter was sick, I couldn't afford her medication, and I was too afraid to ask for help." Tears rolled down Blessing's cheeks. "But 3 weeks ago, Mrs. Namdi Williams asked me about my family for the first time. When I told her about my daughter, she cried. Real tears, not for show. The next day, she paid for 6 months of medication and arranged for ongoing treatment. She tripled my salary and gave me time to be with my children." She looked at Adaeze. "I'm not saying she's perfect now. I'm not saying 4 years of indifference is erased by 3 weeks of kindness. But I am saying that change is possible. And I'm saying that my daughter is alive and healthy because someone chose to see me as a person instead of just a maid." The room was silent. Then another worker spoke, and another, each sharing their story of exploitation followed by transformation, not just from Adaeze, but from other employers who've been moved by the Foundation's work to examine their own practices. A blogger raised her hand. "Mrs. Namdi Williams, your husband's legal team has been circulating a narrative that you're mentally unstable, that this personality change is evidence of a breakdown. How do you respond?" Adaeze felt anger flash through her, but she kept her voice level. Growing a conscience isn't a mental breakdown. Choosing to treat people with dignity isn't instability. If anything, I'd argue that the unstable position is thinking you can exploit people indefinitely without consequences. What about custody of your daughter? I'm fighting for joint custody. I believe I'm becoming a better mother by modeling accountability and compassion. My daughter is learning that people matter more than image, that mistakes can be corrected, and that wealth carries responsibility. Those are lessons I want her to carry into adulthood. The questions continued for another 30 minutes. Some reporters were sympathetic, others skeptical, a few openly hostile. But Adaeze answered each one honestly, without deflection or spin. As the conference ended, a commotion erupted at the back of the room. Emeka had arrived with his lawyer and a camera crew of his own. "This is a circus," he announced loudly. "My wife is having a public breakdown, and instead of getting her help, this man is exploiting her for publicity." Chinedu stood calmly. "Mr. Namdi Williams, you're welcome to stay and ask questions through proper channels, but disrupting a press conference won't help your case." "My case?" Emeka laughed bitterly. "I'm not the one who needs help." "Adaeze, stop this nonsense. Come home. We can fix this privately." Adaeze stood, facing her husband across the crowded room. "There's nothing to fix, Emeka. You want me to go back to being someone I'm ashamed of. I can't do that. Not for you, not for anyone. You're going to lose everything," Emeka warned. "Your friends, your status, your daughter." "I already lost my friends," Adaeze interrupted. "They were never real. My status was built on cruelty. And Zainab? I'm fighting to be the mother she deserves, not the one who teaches her that people are disposable." "This is your final chance," Emeka said, his voice low and threatening. "Walk away from this foundation. Apologize to our friends. And maybe, I'll consider reconciliation." Adaeze felt the eyes of everyone in the room on her. The cameras recording. The journalists taking notes. This moment would define her, one way or another. "No," she said clearly. "I choose to be better. I choose to see people. I choose to use my privilege to lift others up instead of keeping them down. And if that costs me everything else, then so be it." Emeka's face contorted with rage. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," Adaeze said, "but I'll regret it as someone who tried to do the right thing. Can you say the same?" He left without another word, his lawyer and camera crew trailing behind him. The room erupted in chaos, journalists shouting questions, cameras flashing, people talking over each other. But Adaeze felt strangely calm. She'd drawn her line in the sand. Whatever came next, she'd face it as someone who'd chosen her values over her comfort. 3 weeks later, the custody hearing concluded. The judge awarded joint custody, with Zainab splitting her time between both parents. Emeka's lawyers had failed to prove instability. Instead, Adaeze's work with the foundation, the testimonials from her staff, and her documented transformation had painted a picture of someone taking responsibility for her mistakes. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was enough. 6 months after the summit, Adaeze stood in the foundation's new training center, watching as 50 domestic workers attended a workshop on workers' rights and financial literacy. Blessing was there, now the foundation's community outreach coordinator, using her experience to help others navigate employment disputes. Chinedu approached, holding 2 cups of coffee. "How does it feel?" "Exhausting," Adaeze admitted. "Fulfilling. Terrifying. All of it at once." "That's called growth," Chinedu said with a slight smile. "I saw the numbers from last month. We've helped over 300 workers negotiate better contracts. That's incredible. It's a start. There are millions of domestic workers in Nigeria alone. We've barely scratched the surface." Adaeze watched a young woman in the workshop raise her hand to ask a question, her face bright with interest. "You know what I realized? I thought I'd lost everything when this started. My marriage, my friends, my reputation. But I didn't lose anything real. I just stopped pretending that fake things mattered. Do you miss it? The old life?" She considered this honestly. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of not thinking about consequences. But then I talk to someone like Blessing, whose daughter is thriving now because she can afford proper medical care, and I remember why none of that matters." Her phone buzzed. A message from Zainab. "Mommy, can Blessing's kids come over to play this weekend? I want to show them my games." Adaeze smiled and typed back, "Of course. Let's ask Blessing together." She looked at Chinedu. "Thank you for holding up that mirror. Even though it hurt, I needed to see who I'd become." You did the hard part, Chinedu said. You chose to change. Most people just get defensive and double down on their worst behaviors. Speaking of which, Emeka's engaged. Already? To a socialite 20 years younger than him. Someone who won't challenge him or make him uncomfortable. Adaeze felt nothing but distant pity. I hope he's happy, but I doubt he will be. You can't build a real life on appearances. As the workshop concluded and the women filed out, many of them stopped to thank Adaeze. Some hugged her. Others just nodded in acknowledgement. Each interaction was a reminder that people saw her now, really saw her, and what they saw was someone trying. That night, Adaeze sat with Zainab and Blessing's children, watching them play together in her living room. The house felt different now, less like a showpiece and more like a home. "Mommy?" Zainab asked. "Are you happy?" Adaeze pulled her daughter close. "I'm getting there, baby. I'm getting there." The journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more difficult conversations, more moments of doubt. But Adaeze had learned that doing the right thing wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up every day and trying to be better than you were yesterday. She'd been invited to her driver's business summit as a joke, meant to be humiliated and mocked. Instead, she'd been given the greatest gift of her life, the chance to become someone worth being. And she wasn't going to waste it. What did you think of Adaeze's transformation? Do you believe people can really change? Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that will make you think. Drop a comment telling us which moment hit you hardest. We read every single one. Hit that like button if the story moved you, and remember, it's never too late to choose to be better. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.